Hey everybody, Lawrence here at Dirty Basic Terrain, coming at you with another one. Now, you remember the video, my last video? I made this Game Master DM Rebel Rouser screen. Had a lot of baby heads. Yeah, that doesn't sound right, but I had a lot of baby doll bodies left over. And I was like, well, I'm not going to just throw all these out, so let's do something with at least some of them. So what I did was I came up with this monstrosity. This was actually a challenge piece over on Carl Makes Stuff's page. Baby doll head challenge. Well, I had baby doll bodies, and yeah, this works. So I'm going to show you guys how I came up with this monstrosity using leftover baby doll bodies. But before we get to it, I want to give a big shout out to my patrons, Dungeon Matron and Quaro. Your guys' help is always appreciated, and I can't say thank you enough. Alright, so let's get to it. Now here I have a full baby doll left over, and I'm very simply cutting it in half. Because the legs I do not need for this project. But I do need the upper torso and the arms. And pop the head off. Simple, easy, quick. Now that I've got all these babies cut in half, let's start piecing them together to make a babypede. I'm going to trim the edges here to make it a little smoother. I'm not too concerned with like ultra smoothness but right now. But again, just got to cut a little bit smoother, and at the moment I'm trying to keep track of 1, 2, 3, 4, but eventually I just forget that. And here I'm just using some super glue, or some super glue gel, and then placing them together. It's a pretty simple thing, and sometimes I'll use some accelerant to quick dry the glue, but it's just a matter of add super glue, insert torso, rinse and repeat. Now here for the base, my initial thoughts were trace out a perfect shape for the bottom so I could insert it in and make it easy. Honestly, I eventually abandoned this, but for now, I'm just trying to cut out a perfect shape for the bottom piece of the babypede. Now here I'm actually applying a ring of standing stones or something like that, but they're pine bark wood chips. I like using these for when I want to use like a slate-like appearance. They're lightweight and they paint up great, and they're perfect for the scale. But here, like I said, I just cut a little trench into where the foam is, squirt in some hot glue, and then jam it in. It's pretty simple, not too complicated. And here I'm using one of my favorite materials, Sculptamold. This is easy to mix up, basically 2-part Sculptamold to 1-part water to the consistency of cottage cheese. But I'm also adding some burnt umber ink to the water. This way, that when I mix it up, it'll have a brown color to it. And that gives you the advantage of if the paint would ever be chipped or, like a ding or dent gets into the stuff itself, you won't have a bright white spot showing through. Because let's face it, if it's on a table and there are other gamers on there, why should they respect something that doesn't belong to them? They're not going to take care of it like you would yourself. So, I take precautions against that. And also the sculpting mold makes it more durable because it dries hard. So I wanted to use these tiny baby heads I got off of Amazon. Basically what I want to try and do is make it look like this demon monster thing is getting ready to spawn a bunch of baby monsters throughout its back. So what I have to do here is cut the heads off a bunch of these little baby dolls and basically attach them to the back. So right now I'm just cutting up some baby monsters, things, whatever. Okay, here I'm just drilling a hole in, using my X-Acto blade here to make the hole bigger. I drilled the pin vise just for a guide hole. Test fit a baby head, cut a little more out. Like I said, I'm just trying to get it so only the front half of the head shows through. Now that that's done, add some super glue gel, jam the baby head in, and done. And do that a lot more. And here I'm using some milliput to put a small ring around each of the faces. I kind of want to go for the impression like these are pushing out from inside of the body, sort of, kind of, in a way. But I just want to put a small ring of it and smooth out the bottom there, and then add some interesting textures, just to give it like it's getting ready to hatch, or basically come out of the main monster's body. And here I flattened out a piece of milliput and just to basically go over the front, just to give it a segmented look. Because the original look of the baby dolls I was kind of like, eh. So I figured, well, this looks cool. So just texturing some lines, use some different tools to add some interesting textures and stuff, and just make it look like a segmented part of the body. I didn't want all the arms to end in just Babydoll hands. I wanted to give it some kind of grossness. So I'm using one of my, cutting off like every other segment of hands. And I'm going to add one of my favorite things, tentacles. These are tentacles from the Final Faction toys at the Dollar Tree. They have a tentacle pack. Every time I see them, I buy them because they look good and they're really cheap and easy, and they have a good effect. And as you can see, I also added 2 smaller tentacles to the face up there. So it's a pretty simple method. I mean, I don't even really have to do anything. These tentacles that I'm adding to the arms are straight out of the pack. Cut the arm off, or the hand off, add a little super glue, then jam it in. And as far as attaching, that's it. There's some more steps later, but you'll see it. And here I'm using some milliput again. I love milliput ever since I first started using it. But anyways, I'm trying to add a transition zone from the tentacles to the baby arms. Just so it doesn't look... just so it looks cool. Rule of cool always wins. I'm going to smooth it out a little bit. Then I'm going to run some extra textures and try and follow some of the lines from the tentacles themselves into the arm, if possible. And also, just poke a few holes in it. Just make it look kind of gnarly, but then, like I said, somewhat decent transition from the tentacles to the baby arms themselves. Now, I used some of the milliput to basically smooth out some of the hard edges there. And I've also added like some crackle skin with the milliput. But now, just so I don't have to cover the whole thing with milliput, I'm just using some my homemade texture paste. I watered it down a bit to make it a little bit smoother than like my standard texture paste. And I'm just painting it all over. Pretty simple, and the end result is pretty decent. And here I'm adding some boils or burst boils, similar to what I did in my DM screen. Just a ring of milliput, texture it up. Some of them will have little foam balls in them. Some of them will be like already burst open. But again, this is just to like give it a diseased, gross look. Seems to be my thing. Here's another trick I like to use to give it like a diseased pustule appearance. Just add some, instead of super glue then baking powder, it's baking powder then super glue. It's a controlled chaos. You can't really control exactly how it'll turn out, but you can kind of point it in the right direction. And make sure you got a fan or something going, because this stuff stinks. And now, of course, going to be painting the base a bit. I use a dark brown. It's burnt umber for my base coat. And to any area that's going to be dirt, just brown, dark brown. And then here, all the dirt areas, I'm going over with overbrush for a mid-tone color of medium brown. For me personally, this is a nutmeg brown. But, any mid-tone brown will do. And here I'm doing a quick dry brush with a light brown. For me, I'm using a light mocha. But again, any light tan or light brown will do. And I'm going to be painting all the stones with a dark gray. Here I'm using a dark blue gray. That's just my go-to colors for stones. Use whatever colors you want. And of course, then overbrush with a medium gray, pewter gray in my case. Going for like 80% coverage. Just leave the deepest recesses in. Pretty quick, pretty simple, pretty easy. And of course, I've already done the quick dry brush on the stones with the light gray, in my case granite gray. And here I'm just using a homemade wash to go over everything, just to give it a kind of a dirty, nasty look, especially the stones. And I'm using, like I said, this is a dark brown homemade wash. And here I'm using my light brown dry brush color, light mocha, to bring up some of the highlight colors again after the wash is all dry. And same as with the dirt, I'm using my light gray dry highlight color to bring up some of that edge highlighting of the stones. Now I've already primered and zenithal highlighted this entire piece, and now I'm just using some contrast paint to actually get some colors on it. You can go with whatever colors you want. I honestly couldn't remember which one this is at the moment, but I just thought, brown looks good, for the back at least. And here I'm using green, light green. I don't remember what color exactly it is, but another contrast paint to do all the tentacles. And I've already done the main body parts and the arms in a darker green. But this is a quick and easy. Like I said, I am by no means a miniature painter. That's why I rely on stuff like contrast paints and washes and stuff. You can get a decent tabletop quality with these products. So normally I wouldn't use my contrast paints on terrain pieces, but this is a special case, so I went ahead and did it. I wasn't entirely happy with the way the contrast came out on the skin of the monster itself. I mean, it's such a big area. I don't think contrast paints are meant for that big an area. So I went in and grabbed a couple colors of green. A base color for an olive green, then another Spanish olive. And just to try and get it to a point where I was happy with it. And here I'm using the Spanish olive color to basically do a quick dry brush on top of all the skin tones just to bring up some of the highlights. And again, this was just to get it to the point where I was happy with it. And by the end, I was relatively happy with how it turned out.
had painted the eyes a solid yellow color, and once that was dry, I went and grabbed a sepia wash, and just so it would get into the cracks. And here I had mixed up a semi-custom color to basically do a little bit of edge highlighting on the segments of the front body parts. Pretty quick, pretty simple, pretty easy. I wasn't happy with how light the tentacles had turned out, so I hit them up with an armor wash. I had darkened it down to the point where I was happy with it. And it still had like a green tint to it. And here I'm just using antique parchment to paint up all the little like claws and thorns on the tentacles themselves. Just to make them stand out. Time to start filling up the blood pool itself that the baby pede's coming out of. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to be using some 5-minute epoxy. I'm going to add some red ink, some burnt umber ink, just to give it like a gory look to it. I don't want bright red, so I have to add some of the brown just to give it blah. I've also added like an equal part of isopropyl alcohol to the mix. That'll make the 5-minute epoxy pour real quick and easy, and a lot easier than not if you don't add the alcohol. Though the one minor, and I mean this is so minor that it doesn't really matter, but I will mention it, when it does finally cure, it'll have like a hard rubbery texture or feel to it, but visually it doesn't look any different whether or not you add the alcohol. And here I'm adding flocking to my standard way I do it. Some watered down PVA, add some earth flocking, then I'll add some burnt grass flocking, then some yellow for highlighting. If you will notice, though, I have added even more of the 5-minute epoxy and several layers, and the top layer got some real maggots, freeze-dried maggots, but they're real. But don't worry, the epoxy will preserve them for a very long time. And now I'm just adding some tall grass tufts that I made out of some Woodland Scenics field grass. And then also some grass tufts and anywhere that I think, yeah, that'll look good. But also, if you notice, in the head, in the burst open pustule, I used a batch of 5-minute epoxy with some like brownish color just to make it look like infected ooze is pouring out of the bust pustule. But again, what I'm currently doing is just taking some static or grass tufts, dipping in some PVA, and then placing it wherever it looks good.
Hey all, if you made it this far, it means you watched the end, and as always, I do appreciate that. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up. If you want to see more, click subscribe somewhere. If you want to get a hold of me directly, you can always check out my Discord page, link in the description. I said, guys, this was just basically trying to use up some leftover parts from a previous project, and I'm sure we all have leftover parts from previous projects that we can use. So just because you don't use the parts in one build doesn't mean you can't use them in another, which is exactly what I did here. So again, guys, as always, when you're making your terrain or monsters, remember the only person you got to worry about is you, because it's your terrain.